Vice President Kamala Harris is in Ghana today, where she's focusing on strengthening relations. Earlier, she delivered a speech expressing optimism about the future.
The United States will remain a steadfast partner for progress. I am more optimistic than I have ever been about the future and the future of the continent of Africa.
CBS News chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett is following the trip. Major, good to see you, my friend. So what themes have we heard the vice president emphasize in Ghana?
So the vice president, of course, is a historic figure on the continent, the first African-American vice president woman representing the United States. And she's part of a continuous effort within the Biden administration to emphasize U.S. relations with the African continent. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has made trips there. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been there. So has the UN ambassador representing the United States, Linda Thomas-Greenfield. All of this a concerted effort within the Biden administration to identify and highlight potential success stories merging the United States and various African nations. I'm reminded watching the vice president's speech today of covering President Obama, also in Ghana back in 2009. When he expressed a similar kind of optimism about the economic potential of a place like Ghana. Back in 2009, its GDP was $26 billion for that calendar year. 2021, it was $77 billion, meaning it has tripled in those intervening 12 years. And per capita GDP has nearly doubled in Ghana, illustrating what President Obama said back in 2009 and what Vice President Harris emphasized today. That within the African continent, there are countries that are stable, democratic, and growing on their own. And they don't need patronage from the United States. What they need is partnership. And of course, the backdrop behind this entire trip and all Biden administration interactions in the African continent is a counterweight to China, something we'll discuss in greater depth, I suspect.
So I think it's really sort of a little bit interesting, the different places that different people have been sent. That the Secretary of State was sent to Niger, right, where he kind of made a comment about human rights and a complicated history in Niger. But Vice President Harris, you know, Ghana, Zambia, Tanzania, these are stable countries with histories that do not include, as far as I know, glad you know better than me, too much, you know, violence or political upheaval. So that brings me to the messages that she will deliver when she goes to Zambia, when she goes to Tanzania.
Right. And so every time a U.S. official goes to those two countries, closer to the Horn of Africa, they're getting to a zone that's much more conflicted right now. You have historic problems in Burundi and Rwanda just to the north. You have Somalia also to the north, South Sudan. All of those areas have had much more intense tribal and regional conflict. Plus, there are elements of U.S. anti-terrorism policy. So whenever a U.S. official, high-ranking, goes to Zambia or Tanzania, they're also paying attention to those surrounding countries. But there are economic interests in both of those as well. As a matter of fact, when I traveled with President Obama, not only to Ghana, I went with him to Mozambique, I went with him to Tanzania. They are common stops for, at least in the modern era of American presidents, because of their comparative and relative stability and economic progress over the intervening years. And that's one story that U.S. administrations constantly want to tell and constantly want to reinforce. Back to that 2009 speech that President Obama gave, he said, across the continent of Africa, there has been conflict, there has been corruption, there has been, in some areas, less democratic evolution that there needs to be. But where it's taken root, prosperity has often followed. And that's a story that American presidents and top-ranking Biden administration officials want to emphasize.
I should point out that it's interesting that she's not going to Nigeria, which is the largest economy in Africa.
Yes.
And that's been, as somebody who is still close to members of the Nigerian press, it is a sore spot for Nigerians that generally American officials will choose to go to Ghana, which is sometimes perhaps seen by the rest of the world as a bit safer in terms of security risks for the vice president and other officials than Nigeria, even though Nigeria is the clear giant on the continent, Major.
No question, it is by far the most powerful economy on the continent, followed by Kenya and then South Africa. Those two sort of compete, but Nigeria, because of its oil resources and other international trade, by far the biggest economic engine, but it is less secure, both in terms of how you would put a president or a vice president there, and it also has more governance issues. that have been a topic of concern not only for this administration but previous administrations. So Ghana is always regarded as a safer choice. And the U.S. administration, Biden and Obama, never really were secretive about that. They're like, it is more safe, it is more secure, and it is more democratically integrated, not only in Africa, but in the world sense of democracy and stability. And for that reason, it's chosen above Nigeria.
So, you mentioned that much of this sort of hovering in the background is, of course, the relationship that the various countries in Africa have with China and Russia. But China really has been cultivating stronger bonds for decades now. It's not like it's just been 20 years. It's been like 30, 40 years. And the U.S. is sort of trying to play catch up.
Indeed. There's a couple of issues there. First of all, there's the long history of colonialism in Africa, which the United States was benignly neglectful of or nominally supportive of. That's a backdrop that doesn't help the United States in terms of its long-standing relationship on the continent. Also, China has poured hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in it. Yes, it's been there for quite a number of decades, but that investment has dramatically increased and noticeably increased in the last 10 or 15 years. But even when I was traveling on the continent back in 2009, 2011, 2012, you could hear among those who were working in African governments and on the ground that a lot of that Chinese investment was sort of a one-way street. The Chinese were bringing in their own labor, or they were building projects that didn't last and they weren't really that good. And so there was a beginning sense of maybe this investment isn't all that great. Yes, it's much larger in dollar terms than the United States, but the United States does want to say and does want to demonstrate that it is not an exploitive relationship. It's not a colonial relationship. It's not a one-way relationship. It is a partnership. Those things take longer to germinate. They take longer to take hold, but they are part of a concerted U.S. policy, certainly articulated much more aggressively and vocally by the Biden administration than the Trump administration, to at least begin the process or advance the process already undertaken to be a counterweight to China.
Right. Major, sorry, do you have something to say?
No, I was going to say,
great talking to you, right?
It's always great talking to you. And Major, fun fact, Major may not remember this, but I first met Major Garrett when President Obama visited Senegal back in 2013, or I think it was 2012. I don't remember exactly, but that was my first time with the White House press corps, because I was covering it on behalf of CNN, and the White House press corps came to town, and I was sitting there like at the end of President Obama's visit with Major in a bar, just listening to him wax eloquent as he does every day on our air. So it's a very fond memory of that.
I am jealous, because Major Garrett sitting at a bar, it is one of my bucket list things to sit down with Major Garrett at a bar. All right, we'll get to that list, Major.
Yeah, Major. On that note, have a good morning, one and all.
Thank you, Major.
All right, thank you so much.